Well, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. This is our ninth Acquisition Workforce Subcommittee meeting for the FAC, which is quite a journey here. So we are looking forward to today's meeting. I'm Boris Arati, again, the designated federal officer, and really want to welcome you all again. I want to start by doing a roll call, so let's do that. And I will go ahead and start calling names here and see who's over here. Gail. Okay, I see Daryl and Nicole, and I see Mark.
Hello,
David. Hello, David. Yeah, Anne. And then I believe Steve is out in Bangkok, so I'm not sure he's going to be able to join today. And I know Kristen is out, and then Clyde also sent a note. He wasn't going to be able to join. And Troy, we have a lot of international folks today, and Troy is out in Ireland. And I think Cassius might join us a little bit later. But we are at a very crucial point here in our committee. And those, if you're from the public, I welcome you to this meeting today. And but I'm going to turn it over to our subcommittee chairs, Nicole and Anne. Nicole, take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Boris. We are at a very important milestone as a committee, as a subcommittee. We're in the run-up to our first set of recommendations to GSA about how to embed sustainability into federal acquisition. And this is our last, I would say, substantive meeting that we're having related to the different recommendations we're advancing. And one of those recommendations relates to change acceleration, as you know. And so we've invited here Professor Andrew Hoffman to come and talk with us a little bit about change management and how this functions across all sorts of organizations. So we can ask ourselves whether we've done due diligence in crafting this recommendation, whether we should be considering other aspects that we haven't as yet, whether we can forecast ahead in looking at our different priorities, because we have more than one, as we look towards priority 2, whether some of the conversations today could then be transported to those future discussions. So I just want to thank you all for coming, and I very much appreciate the efforts that you've put into advancing these recommendations thus far. And I'll pass the baton to Anne to provide any comments before we move into the main part of the meeting.
No, I'm very interested in hearing from the professor today. When's the last time you were called professor?
Please call me Andy.
Will do. You know, Andy, our recommendations are first focused on implementing them within GSA, but ultimately across the federal government. So I'm really interested in hearing about your viewpoints around change management across, you know, the very broad, large, complex, decentralized organization known as the federal government, which I'm sure is not
okay. Just a small challenge. Let's change the entire federal government. Okay, I can get that done in about 15 minutes. No problem.
So I think, you know, we could initially think about how do we drive this change just across GSA, and then implementing broader at a later point across the federal government.
So I think that's an important setup, and especially for the rest of the committee, because as Andy is talking, I hope you take that nugget, that framing that Anne has put forward to heart, because this is not a one and done. This is not just one recommendation that gets advanced to GSA. It is really thinking about the 2 years ahead of us and how we're going to connect each of our recommendations to this broader change that is advancing within the agency and potentially across the whole federal government. So Andy, I'll go ahead and introduce you and we can get started.
Okay.
Yeah, so Andy Hoffman is the Holcim Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan. He has a joint appointment both in the Stephen M. Ross School of Business and the School of Environment and Sustainability. His research is using organization behavior models and theories to understand the cultural and institutional aspects of environmental issues for organizations. And he's here to talk with us about change management and change acceleration.
I thought you were going to go further.
No. So he's been researching this topic for a long time. And most recently, he's been applying these concepts to the area of climate change, which is directly related to how we are anchoring ourselves as a subcommittee. So with that, Andy, please take it away.
Well, I want to be careful. I'm not going to come in and tell you how to do your job. I don't know the challenge before you. I've done a lot of work with companies on how to get climate change into their strategy, and it's not just a strategic challenge. One of the jokes we have in business school is that students just think that they just have to come up with the right idea and they're done. And you spend 10% of your time making a decision, you spend 90% of your time making it the right decision. The hardest part of management is convincing people this is the right thing to do and then getting them to do it. That's management. And so bringing sustainability, bringing climate change into the culture of an organization, that's hard work. And so Nicole shared a conceptual note that I use in teaching on this topic. And I thought I'd just share, if I can I share my screen? Yeah. Just that slide right there. Let's just anchor on that for a discussion. The left side of it comes from an organizational scholar named Kurt Lewin. And the right side of it comes from an organizational scholar named John Cotter. And I've just put them together. So I'm just going to use this as a framework to think about the process of organizational change. It's not just simply, we've got a new edict, do it. You might get a response, but will you get a good response? Will you get the best response you can? And so Kurt Lewin breaks it out into 4 stages. And within that, John Cotter breaks it out into 8 steps. And the first one is diagnosis. What's wrong? What are you trying to fix? And if it's merely an executive order that comes from on high, you can hang on that, but will that motivate people to change? And will that give you a clear direction on what needs to change? And so some effort on diagnosis. What is the purpose behind what you're doing? What is the end state you desire? And what are the pieces of the organization that you have to work on? And we describe it that a good vision has 3 parts. A clear state of the present reality, a clear state of the future, desired future, and then a roadmap to get from point A to point B. And all 3 of these have to be present, and that comes out in your diagnosis. I can have a vision that, I'm going to be the smartest guy in the world. I have to start with who I am right now and how am I going to get there? And chances are I can't put those 3 pieces together. Therefore, no one's going to follow me. And so you got to put those 3 pieces together. The second phase is that's supposed to be unfreezing. I just realized there's a typo in there. That thing has been around forever. That phase 2 should be unfreezing. I'm going to fix this. And it wouldn't make sense if it just freezing. Unfreezing, getting the organization ready to change. And this is an important step that a lot of people skip. They just go straight to movement. Let's start to change things, but you got to get people ready for it. Now, I can imagine your challenge is you're constantly in change mode. You're constantly having to do new things. And so in some ways, it's like changing the tire where the car is moving, and this becomes very difficult. This is a nice, clean model. One change effort by itself. And so fitting this in with your other activities, ideally dovetailing it in with your other activities, can make this much easier. And again, I'm going to talk in a very sort of pure academic sense, and you guys are going to have to figure out how to work this into your practical context. But the 3 steps in unfreezing, line that out, phase 2 unfreezing, is first of all, establish a sense of urgency. Why are you doing this? If people don't know why you're doing it, they'll go through the motions, but are they going to really be involved? I've talked to corporate executives who have deliberately brought in a consulting firm to do an analysis, knowing that the results are going to be pretty negative, as a way to motivate people to say, we got a problem here, folks, and we got to change. It could be the dean of my school giving financial projections saying, hey, folks, tuition dollars are going to start dropping as people don't sign up for MBAs anymore. We got a pending crisis. We got to do something. You got You got to create the urgency for change. Why do I need to do this? Because there's tremendous inertia. People don't want to change. There's a defensive perception. Change is going to be bad for me. It threatens political power bases. They may not have the resources to do it. There's just habit and habitual routine. All these things you're trying to break. Organizations like inertia. People like inertia. When I teach in class and I teach this concept, the funniest way to get this across, and it works every time, it's around the 5th or 6th class, and everybody's been sitting in the exact same seat since day one. So I say, everyone, get up, grab your stuff, and move. And their feet are like they're in cement. They don't want to do it. They don't like doing it because we like consistency. We like certainty. We don't like change. And so establishing the sense of urgency can get you to do that. And then form a powerful guiding coalition. Someone's got to be behind this. Someone's got to be the champion. You've all seen it. You're sitting in a meeting. Someone comes up with a great idea. Oh, who's going to take charge of this? Everyone puts their head down. But without someone as the lead, as the figurehead, and a team and the key members behind it, it's not going to go. And then again, create that vision. Not only why are we doing this, but where are we going? What are we trying to do? And set that vision carefully. There's a very funny talk that when I was at Northwestern, Gary Barnett was the coach, and he took the football team to the Rose Bowl. And Northwestern was a perennial whipping dog of the Big Ten. No one expected them to do it. But when he took over the job, he said, my vision is to get the team to the Rose Bowl. He didn't say, my goal is to win the Rose Bowl. And he really did find that the team felt like they'd have accomplished the task. We're in the Rose Bowl. He's like, wait, we got to win this game. And he really had to ramp it up again. So pick your vision carefully. And then all that is preparation for movement. The movement is around, you got to communicate that vision. You can do it through speech. You can do it through artifacts. I've known of companies to put their vision on keychains, people put it in their wallet. You can put it on coffee mugs. You just have to communicate it in any way you can. And ideally, someone senior is one of those spokesperson. When I've been doing work on corporations and climate change, if the CEO isn't talking about it, it's going to be very hard to get this moving. So senior leadership is really important. And then empower others to act, empower people to take steps, empower people to own it. And then the creativity comes out, and this is where it gets fun. If you just tell people what to do, they'll do what you tell them to do. But if you empower them to act, they'll come up with other ideas that you probably haven't thought of. And in fact, in many ways, you can't think of because you're not in their context. So you want people to own this. And then number 6, plan for and create short-term wins and publicize them. If you have short-term objectives that are met, easy wins, you publicize them. That tells people 2 things. 1, it's working. We're doing this. And 2, the train is moving. If you were to draw a bell curve of people in your organization facing a change initiative, on the right-hand side of the bell curve are people who embrace change. There are people who just love change. They love the excitement of it. On the other end of the bell curve, people who don't want change. They just drag their feet. They resist. And the vast majority of people are in the middle trying to figure out, should I expend the effort? Should I do this? And short-term wins can convince that undecided middle, get on board. We're moving. And that can really get things moving. And then consolidate improvements, step 7, consolidate improvements and produce still more change. Don't concede victory too soon. Keep on pushing. Sometimes even past your original vision statement. If you got the momentum moving, keep it going, because once you've unfrozen and once you've things moving and once you've got momentum, when you stop, it's very hard to get it going again. So if you've got momentum, milk everything out of it you can. And then the final stage is refreeze. Now, I do have a qualm with that word refreeze. That makes it sound like you just cement it in place, never to move again. And I'm not so sure that's the right metaphor, but that's Kurt Lewin's metaphor, and he's famous, so we'll leave it. But I like the idea of just saying, communicate back to people. You just went through this. You probably found it unpleasant. Here's why we did it. Here are the benefits for doing it. Here's why the world is a better place for you doing it. Thank you for doing it. And you just celebrate it and you show people, yeah. And that can go a long way towards the next time you say, can you do this for us? They'll say, yeah, I like the outcome of the last process and you guided us through it. So yeah, maybe I will. A lot of people skip this step and a lot of people are sitting at their desk scratching their head going, okay, what was that all for? Why did we do that? What was the outcome? What was the benefit? And that's just not a good outcome. So if you can think about that process, not just what are you trying to do, and then that conceptual note has a couple of other things that could be useful. What are you changing? Reward structures. You got to change reward structures, organizational structure, political power relationships, funding. What are the sources of inertia? Why would people resist? It walks through those as well, and I've already mentioned those. So I hope that conceptual note is helpful. And maybe with that, we can just start a conversation. Then I'll stop sharing my screen.
So yeah, we're going to just go ahead and open it up right now. It's an opportunity for the subcommittee to react to this, to reflect on how our recommendations are moving forward, to poke at some of the broader concepts that Andy has discussed here. One thing that occurred to me, Anne, as we were listening to this is this guiding coalition.
Mhm.
The GAP FAC is part of this guiding coalition as well, right? This really is the first step in creating that vision within and how it gets operationalized. So the work that you all are doing is really an important part of this, even though we didn't articulate it as part of our recommendations.
And if I could add one more thing, I've criticized the model of Kurt Lewin for refreezing. I do have a critique of John Cotter's model too. If you read John Cotter's book, he says you have to walk through all these steps and you have to do it in order. And I don't believe that. Sometimes, the context doesn't require all of these, or maybe you diminish one and you accentuate another, or maybe you have to flip the order. Maybe after you create the vision, then you decide, okay, to achieve this vision, here's the team we need to put together to bring in. So it is not, those boxes are nice and clean. The process is not. It's messy. Don't be afraid to put things out of order, go back, skip a step, jump around.
So, go ahead, Anne.
Do you have examples of a best practice around creating a sense of urgency within the realm of sustainability?
Well, a number of them. I mean, where's the pressure coming from? So, for example, right now, employees are exercising their strength and their leverage within organizations. McKinsey had a letter signed by the rank and file saying, we want you to disclose the carbon emissions of all our clients. That came from inside. Same thing happened at Amazon. They wanted Amazon to take action on climate change. It came from inside. It could be an exterior protest. It could be an attack from an environmental group that can push change. An important point of this is also, by the way, that these kinds of events are not objective occurrences. You frame them in the way that they become an urgent challenge or threat. What is that protest? Well, it's a bunch of rabble-rouse. They don't know who we are. Maybe we don't do anything. Who are those protesters? They actually have a good point, and they might actually affect our customers. That can start to create a sense of urgency. So you have to interpret these events for your staff to say, this is why we need to care that, the Earth Liberation Front thinks we're a bunch of jerks, or that spill in the Gulf of Mexico. To my mind, that was framed badly by the environmental movement. That was framed as an economic issue. It wasn't framed as an environmental issue. The environmentalists were afraid to call that an environmental problem because they didn't want to go against jobs, and they missed an opportunity. So how you frame an event. A classic example, you've got Hurricane Katrina. Very little change after that. Then you've got Hurricane Sandy. Huge change after that. What's the difference? Michael Bloomberg, New York City, calling it climate change. Hurricane Katrina, politically disconnected city, no key spokespeople saying that was climate change, folks, but Sandy in New York was. So you gotta frame what's happening as the reason for urgency. It's not just self-evident by itself.
Mark, I see your hand up, but I want to ask Boris a quick question, and it connects to something Andy said earlier related to this issue of urgency. Has GSA actually undertaken an assessment internally about its total climate impacts associated with the acquisition life cycle?
I think a short answer on that is like a full assessment, Nicole. I don't think so. I could definitely confirm. I know we've had a lot more activity on the building side of GSA, like the public building service, because there's been a good amount of work in sustainability for a long time on the public building service. Like the whole, and even the other advisory committee, the Green Buildings Advisory Committee has done to some extent that, but I'm not sure that we've done that on the acquisition side of the house. Yeah.
And my suspicion is that that wasn't necessarily framed as an urgent call to action, or was it? How did that roll forward?
So on the building side of GSA, well, it really started, there was a law, gosh, I want to say about 10 years ago, that stood up a whole organization in GSA called the Green Buildings, High Performing Green Buildings team. And so our chief sustainability officer actually leads that office. So that actually started a while ago, and it has grown since then gradually, so that we are now doing a lot of work in that area. But again, that's on the public building service side of GSA.
And I would like to stress that how you frame this is important. Framing is everything. What frame is going to work for the audience you're talking to? So in the corporations I work with, they typically don't make the moral case to their staff. Okay, we got to do something about climate change because it's an existential threat to human beings. Okay, but if you really want to get action, this is going to affect our share price. Our insurance companies are really concerned about this. Is going to affect our premiums. The socially responsible investing community is going to start to move on this, is moving on this. ESG investing is going to raise our cost of capital. Our consumers really care about this. And then you fit the frame with the organization. So Procter & Gamble, consumer goods company, you better connect this to consumers. They're not going to move. Walmart, all about moving stuff around the country, cheap and easy, connected to operational costs. Then they'll move. Find the frame that works for your audience. And it isn't always the moral one. You may all agree, but some people may just say, you know what, but what's the pressing need? Yeah, we can do it, but is climate change going to be affected? Maybe not, but if it's going to affect our budgets, is it going to affect our appropriation? Now you hit my sweet spot. Now I'm going to sit up and pay attention.
Yeah. Mark, why don't you jump on in?
Thank you, Nicole. So a couple of things I want to echo Andy's presentation, because I really believe it and I've lived it, and I can give examples. One is a tale of two accounting systems. When we did an upgrade to our PeopleSoft share system, the first time it happened, the upgrade was just launched by the Department of Information Technology. It was an utter failure, and the effort it took to get people to do it correctly and to learn it could have been avoided. And in fact, it was a lesson learned. And the second time they did it with pre-communication, training, and post-communication. And they had, and I hope you can still hear me. Everybody froze on me a sec.
Yeah, we can hear you. Your face is frozen, but we can hear you.
All right, sorry about that. So the answer is you really need to have that package of pre-communication and training in order to get the system launched correctly. The next thing I'll talk a little bit about is the urgency. I think really setting the example of urgency and acting that way is the way to get that message across to employees and others. And then I'll go into another example where I really think Andy hit the nail on the head. And that is with sustainability. I created a class after I had gone to Glasgow for the COP26. And I thought this was the greatest thing because it really showed that in context, everything that somebody needed in order to understand sustainability and why it was important. And I incorporated that into a class that I then presented to Mexico State University as part of the curriculum for certifying chief procurement officers throughout the state. Instead of being greeted, I was told, you know, you can take all of that fluff and put it into one collage and spend maybe a couple minutes on it. But really what you need to do is teach the tools that they need to use. And I said, look, we don't have a law. We don't have an executive order. In fact, anybody that does this is pretty crazy because they're putting their job at stake. So what I need to do is win their hearts and souls. I need to convince them this is the right thing to do. And even though it's nibbling around the edges, the tools I am going to show you can get you there, but it's not going to be the way it's done on other things. And so it failed because our state decided that they wanted to emphasize tools over the belief system. And I think that's really what we have to do. The framing was wrong to echo Andy. So thank you, Andy. I think you're on point.
Thank you.
David, did you want to jump in? This is your space. You talk about change management so much. I'm curious about how this is connecting with you and what you're thinking about our recommendations.
Well, the recommendations are one thing, change management's another. And with all due respect to this auspicious group, I really think, I believe in a concept of stakeholder management. And so somewhere along the line, as a part of our recommendation, or as at least a footnote to it, we should be thinking about internal steering committees that have voices on them that could lead change inside the organization. Our problem is we're not there physically. Great group. I think we're doing great work in terms of making recommendations, but at the end of the day, someone inside the organization has to take the lead on some of these recommendations. So I usually try to formulate that in the form of a steering committee. And as I've said 1,000 times, I think people believe first and then they act. And so first, the steering committee has to create the belief that this is important, that is that sense of urgency that Andy spoke about is real. And then they have to check on and ask questions about what is being done on a regular basis, because staff responds to what leadership questions, right? If leaders are asking questions, staff is going to know that's something that they care about. So that's why the steering committees internal to GSA and to the organization are going to really be key. Probably for each of these subcommittees, there's probably going to need to be some form of a steering committee formed inside the organization that helps to drive change. And I'll stop there.
So in our draft recommendations, we've touched on this a bit, right? And I think it's worth us reflecting on what we have in there. We have the national level, Boris, I always forget the name of this. It was the sustainability, help me out.
Yeah, there's a
Leadership
national,
Council.
yeah,
That's it.
sustainability, right, leadership council at the national level, right?
SSLC, I think, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, and yeah. Mhm.
we're talking
Is
about
that within GSA?
Within
Yes.
GSA, right, but the idea, David, is to reinvigorate it. So the idea was there, but it's just how do we inject new life into it? And I
And
think
then-
that's where we're
And
going.
maybe the thought too is that oversight group too broad in its view, and should it consider SWAT teams that are
Right.
formulated out of it that drives each of these subcommittee sort of recommendations?
Right.
So David, is currently constructed, we have that national level focus, and then we have regional level steering committee members focusing on what's happening within regions. And then that is connected to essentially what we call it something else, but they're tiger teams within of specialists who can crowdsource solutions around particular problems that then get fed up to the higher level the coordination, GSA is a huge organization, so the coordination around this is going to be really important. But I think to Andy's central point, you need individuals within who are recognized as being leaders. We need to acknowledge that these individuals need to have heft and respect within GSA, so that whatever recommendations get advanced, get airtime. But then additionally, they're going to serve as a critical force in embedding the change within the area of their focus, right? So
Yeah,
not
well,
only are they speaking up, they're also communicating downwards as well.
let me just add to that. I think you're right on point, Nicole, but the other thing I think is that it should be I think there's a real exercise to be done engaging in stakeholder mapping, understanding who the stakeholders are, who are the folks that are going to be supportive, who are the folks that are going to be skeptical and sort of sit on the fence. And because you really like to naively go into this believing that everybody's on board just is a signal of just being naive, right? So I take the time in change initiatives to really map who are the key stakeholders, what might their position be, and really, and it's funny, I don't start with the folks that are problematic. I start with the people that are high energy and enthusiastic because they drive inertia, right? So that's kind of my approach on that. I don't know,
David,
Andy, you're the expert, so tell me if I'm nuts.
No, you're not nuts at all. In fact, if you drew that map and on, say, the horizontal axis, those who are going to resist, those who are going to sit on the fence, those who are going to embrace, the big group is in the middle. But then you can also put on the vertical axis, who do we need? And if you get someone in the category who's going to resist, but we need, you're going to have to devote some attention there. But you're absolutely right also that those with the energy that embrace it, those are your first target, because they're going to create the excitement and the momentum. It's kind of like when you roll out a first model electric car. Who are you going to go after? The people who are going to be so excited about this new technology, are going to take the risk that it may not work. They're still going to do it. And they'll create the excitement and the energy for others to follow. Because the vast majority of the people are going to be sitting there going, either A, I don't want to do this, or you should assume most people are going to be like, do I have to do this? Do I want to do this? Who's doing it? Why should I move? And you're going to have to get them off their butts.
Exactly. And by the way, why do I have to do this and the other stuff they're asking me to do?
Exactly. And the last time they asked me to do this, I don't know why we did it. We went through all this hassle and never saw any results. So why should I jump now?
Yeah.
Mark, I see your hand up, but before we move on from this conversation, because I think it's really important, Andy, David used a word that you discuss a lot, and that's the blockers, right? Managing the blockers. Can you offer the subcommittee a few just sort of techniques that have worked in other organizations to manage blockers?
Geez, yeah, that's a hard one. What kind of people will they listen to? What kind of arguments will they listen to? Personal connections, and it's not always people in power. You get the organizational structure, but then you get the political power. It could be someone online that doesn't have a highfalutin title, but everyone looks at them as a thought leader. And
Influencers,
yeah. So how do you draw them in? Personal connections, people that they trust, but also how you frame it. I mean, I'm thinking about the work I've done on talking to climate skeptics, and you got to find the argument that works with the person you're talking to. You have to frame it in a way that they're going to resonate with. What is that sense of urgency that's going to get them to move?
What I would add to Andy's comment is you better have them engaged, because if you have them on the outskirts not engaged, what they're doing is creating negative energy, right? But if you can push them into some role where they're engaged in that process, you're likely going to get a better result.
Now, you don't always have to get them to become part of that active embracing group. You just have to, as you said, David, not be creating the negative energy that's going to get others, those undecided middle, to say, well, I really respect David and his opinion. He says, this is nonsense. I'm not going to do it. You got to get David to say, and I'm not talking about you, David, but I'm just using your name, but you got to get this person to not stand in the way, and then ideally to be part of the team of moving it forward.
Have you
Mark,
seen guiding coalitions that have been successful and then some that haven't been successful? And what are the characteristics that make one successful or one less successful?
I think it's a nice connection between these two topics, because did you get all the necessary people, both internally and externally, on the team? And then the other side of that coin is, did you blow it up? I mean, you could bring everyone in, including the kitchen sink, and just turn this into an unwieldy process. So how do you get the right scale and size that's inclusive of who's necessary to move this forward, recognizing any kind of personality conflicts that are going to emerge, any kind of political dynamics or power dynamics that are going to bring your team to a close. This is just managing people 101, of getting the right people in the room and making sure, Nicole knows this. It's kind of like picking a dissertation committee. You pick two committee members that hate each other, you're done. You are done. And so you gotta choose wisely, but don't leave anybody out. Like, if I left somebody out and my research is right up that person's alley, their nose is going to be out of joint and they're going to be a problem. So you just have to think carefully about who's out there. You could do this in conjunction with David's stakeholder mapping to figure out who needs to be on this to make this go.
Mark, your hand's up. Are you still there?
I'm still here. Everything's freezing up, so I'm trying to not use my camera so much. Assuming you can still hear me, though, I really want to say that the things that Andy and David have said really resonate with me. And I really think that the leadership role is extremely important. And if you can take the leadership, combine it with success examples, and then build that momentum with low-hanging fruit and getting your star performers to show others the way, that is really the mapping that I buy into, because I've seen it time and time again. And without it, you're just going to have people take shortcuts, and it's probably not going to be the direction you want to go. So thank you both.
Boris?
Yeah, hey, Andy, I wanted to explore a little bit of our reality here and just talk about this just very clearly. The people that we're targeting, the acquisition workforce, let's just say GSA, several thousand of them. They're very busy people. They've got a lot of competing priorities. So climate sustainability is one in a series of other things that they are being asked to do. Like every organization, we're having trouble getting enough, and Anne is very familiar with this when she was in the government, trying to hire enough people to just even do the basics. And so we're competing with other things, not just climate sustainability is one. And I'm just curious, we talked about urgency, but how can we think about what will make this stand out over the other competing priorities that
you are so reading my mind more,
because that's the kind of thing our leadership's thinking about GSA right now. I mean, they're thinking about the talent pipeline, but right now there's just a lot that we're putting on their plates, and this is what we're going to be facing in a couple of weeks when we get in front of GSA, and the administrator is going to be there. It's like, it's an awesome set of recommendations, but just thinking about how do we break through the other things that are going on. So I just love to hear your thoughts and perspectives on that.
Right. When everything's urgent, nothing is urgent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would begin, is there a way to frame this where it's not zero sum, where you have to displace something else to put this at the top? An example, here at the Ross School of Business, I'm part of a team trying to get climate change into the core courses. And the answer from the faculty members are all the same. What do you want me to take out to put in there? Because my course is perfect, just as it is. And if you're asking me to displace something, I can't. So we come back and say, how does climate change dovetail with what you're teaching? In operations, how does it fit with queuing models? In marketing, how does it fit with consumer choices and preferences? How do you fit it in so that it's synergistic and not, and it won't be perfectly synergistic, but try and get some overlap. I've done work with Whirlpool, and they quite proudly say, we never talk about climate change. We talk about energy efficiency because we've been working on energy efficiency for 20 years, and that's the only way we're going to do climate change. So why add a new thing? It's just going to complicate things and it's going to create resistance. Fit it in with what they already know. Now, that sounds really neat and clean, and maybe you can't, but there must be places that you can. You can say this can dovetail with what you're doing, because once it's additive, then they're doing that calculation in their head and saying, screw that, I've got 10 other priorities. Why should this jump to the top? Unless someone really threatens me, and that's never a good way to motivate.
No, that's awesome. I think that line of thinking definitely triggers some thoughts in my mind. I'm not in the committee. I'm just kind of helping get, but I wonder if the members are thinking about that, because that's.
I'd like this to come into the Jamboard session next. I think that's a good roll your sleeves up sort of conversation for us to get into. David.
Just gonna say the notion of adding something to the existing heavy workload is a really big deal. Last week I was up in DC at the Pan American Health Organization teaching a class on category management, which is strictly procurement related. Their biggest concern was exactly what you just mentioned, which is, yeah, we want to do this, but how do we do this along with everything that we're doing? And so I explained how I've approached that in the past. And Boris, this may or may not be an option, but what I've tried to do in the past is I will bring in a consultant that focuses on that area. And then I will pick a couple of enthusiastic people that are inside the organization to work with them. And the consultant has two missions. One, to get us off the ground with respect to whatever the change initiative is. But the other one is knowledge transfer, to make sure that the folks that I assign with them have enough knowledge to kind of keep things going, because nobody wants consultants around forever, right? So you want the enthusiastic folks to work with them, get a sense for process and approach and how you get things done, and then you want them to lead it. So I've used that approach in many instances. It may be something for the Jamboard, I don't know, Nicole, but just a comment on what we're talking about. It's an ongoing issue. It's always an issue. And because I've been involved in so many change initiatives, that's been a big part of my approach.
And if I could build on what David said, you know, the idea of creating a vision, understanding the context in which you're walking in. If people are harried and frazzled and overworked, that's an important piece of information on, you know, the three parts of the vision. This is our present reality. And it's a funny kind of thing, but in some ways, the easiest time to make major change is when things are going to hell. Periods of chaos, things are breaking apart. When's the hardest time to make change? When things are smooth and safe, you know, going really nicely. That's not the time to be trying to make major changes, because why should I change? Everything's fine. Chaos and things going to hell, the unfreezing process has already begun. They're desperate for something. And so if people are frazzled and overworked, then you should know that and try and frame this in some way to pull it all together to say, at the end of this, we're going to try and make your job easier. But if it's additive, you're going to have a really hard road to walk.
So I think this conversation was touching on another point that has been rolling through my head, and it relates to this notion of the urgency that comes with creating change to make our economy net zero, right? There's enormous urgency that's happening certainly within federal circles right now in the conversations about how do we create a net zero government. And that is really one of the big motivators within GSA right now. The administrators want the change to happen really quickly, right? But there's also a hazard of pushing too hard, too much, too quickly. I'm just curious, as you think about the complexities of climate change and creating that change that's absolutely necessary, what does the tightrope look like here? What's the sweet spot? And maybe you've already said it, and it's connecting with this notion of building synergies with other activities within the organization, so it doesn't feel like it's too much. We're in some ways making their job easier because they're able to achieve other objectives along the way. But I'd just like to hear what your thoughts are on this. Are you there, Andy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to the team. Sorry about that.
No.
I'm sorry. Can you say it one more time?
Sure.
I thought you were saying something to the team.
No. So it's really this notion that GSA is, and within the federal government, there's a lot of urgency being expressed to create a net zero economy, and look at the federal government as one of the mechanisms to get us there. And certainly purchasing is a huge connector within this, and federal acquisition. With this urgency comes the risk of creating too much change too quickly, right? If you move too fast and you don't bring the people along the way, then you create pitfalls for the organization where you never reach that refreeze stage. You're just constantly spiraling in the middle. And so I'm just really interested in hearing your thoughts about how you advance the change in a way that you can do it steadily, you can make it stick, but you're still heeding to the urgency of the call.
Well, I mean, but let me walk through a couple of things that triggers. One, yes, there's urgency to go net zero. Okay. What does that urgency look like? Yeah. In an abstract way, I hear the IPCC reports that say that by 2030, if we don't handle this thing, we're going to have irreversible damage to the global climate. Does that create urgency? I think for many people, that's still very abstract. And so therefore it doesn't. Now, people in Houston after Hurricane Harvey, their equation of urgency just suddenly radically changed. Or what's about to happen in California with this crazy snowpack just starts to melt. There's their urgency. And that's, you know, so just saying that, you know, life as we know it on Earth is going to end by 2100 if we don't do something. That's not urgency. That's still very, very abstract. And so it's hard for people to grab onto that. And if you push too hard and too fast without knowing where they stand, what's the pulse? If then they're just going to burn out, or they're just going to just say, you know, this is silly. I'm gonna check out. We can't. You know, Germany just shut off their nuclear power plants. A lot of people are scratching their head going, what the hell did you just do? Well, we have to fire up some coal-fired power plants to get us there. Now people are just spinning their heads like, what is going on here? And so, you know, if you push too fast, something has to give. I like the idea of it's a system. And so if you push too fast in one area, something's going to give someplace else. Pacing, keeping a sense of where people are, their level of motivation and engagement, and not pushing too hard. Just think about a coach for a sports team. You push the team too hard, they will break and you will have no team. And so, you know, what was it? Woody Hayes said the coach's job is to get everybody to start, everyone's heart to beat with the same heartbeat. And what he meant by that is you got to allow the people that are way ahead, you got to pull them back a little bit. The people that are lagging, you got to pull them up a little bit so everyone's in the same place. You don't put everybody at the same pace as the fastest runner. The team can't keep up. And so find a balance where everyone can be at the same place, be of the same heartbeat. I don't know if football analogies work for you guys. I'm at Michigan, so we just always talk about football.
I think to the committee, one thing that's important about this conversation is the connection to priority 2, which is how do we think about using automation technologies and other mechanisms to make this drop dead easy, recognizing that those competing priorities are going to be really difficult to resolve if we don't figure out ways to make this easier along the way. Daryl, we haven't heard from you. You want to jump in?
Sure. I was curious, Andy, and I'm actually in Michigan too, right around the corner from you in Ypsilanti.
Oh,
curious if with the steps in the change model, is there something there that we should really zero in on or focus on that I mean, I know we've talked about, I know the vision and the urgency, I know all that's really critical, but is there something that's a must not miss, or or even a piece that is not there that we could consider, given that we're dealing with the government? I mean, I'm assuming this applies to private sector and government, but you know, it is the government.
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, each one fits. You have to think about the context in which you're doing this. For example, number 5, empower others to act. Well, do you know exactly how to get to that future state, or what that future state is? Do you know exactly? Well, if you do, if you know exactly, then maybe people don't need to be empowered as much. You just got to get them to do it. If you don't know, and you want them to have the freedom to improvise and come up with ideas on how to get there, then empowering others to act becomes more important. The sense of urgency. I mean, do I have to convince people in the Environmental Protection Agency that climate change is an important issue? Probably not. Do I have to convince people in the GSA that's an important issue? Maybe a little more. Do I have to convince people in ExxonMobil it's an important issue? Surprisingly, there are a lot of people who know it's an important issue. Their sense of urgency comes down to whether the corporation is going to move, and now the conversation shifts. So I'm not trying to dodge your question, Daryl, but try and look at the context in which you're operating. Maybe some of those steps have already been touched on. Maybe they're more or less important, and you can set the priorities there. And this is important because one of the worst things you can ever do with an organization is just take a model from some other organization and jam it into your own. And GE came up with total quality management, for example, and it became the rage in management, and everyone was trying to develop their total quality management programs. What they were doing was jamming a GE program into their own company, and it didn't work. They actually started jokingly calling it total quality management because it was just screwing up these organizations. Here at the University of Michigan, we're walking through this right now. We have gone to a shared services model. It's killing us. And I'm talking to people in other companies going, what are you guys doing? We did that 10 years ago. We realized it was a mistake. But our consultant who came in, who frankly knew nothing about higher ed, says this is the way to go, and it's not working. So, make this fit your organization. If you don't feel it fits, chuck a piece of it. This is just the building blocks. Do not treat this as gospel. It is not.
Yeah.
We have a couple.
Just to add a little context on that point, that the people that work in acquisition at the government also operate under several rules, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So there's those levers as well that tend to drive action. Not just because you put a regulation out there doesn't mean everybody's going to do it perfectly, but that's another bit of a layer that these people are dealing with here, the set of rules that they're working with, and the industry that responds to these requests for proposals that operate under those rules as well. Yeah, go ahead, Nicole. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have a couple of minutes left. If anyone else has another question for Angie or thought for the group.
AI has a role in everything. I don't know. Everyone's buzzing on AI right now, Chat GPT. We're concerned about it in higher education. Students, I am quite sure, are writing papers with Chat GPT. I've gotten emails from companies saying, I know you're a professor. Do you not have time to grade your papers? We have a AI software that will grade them for you. Nick Cage, someone took his work, he's a singer, a songwriter, and AI produced some songs, supposedly on his style. He was quite offended by that. We're about to have a faculty meeting or faculty retreat, and we have to come up with a new vision and mission for the organization because we have a lot of turnover. And just for yucks, I took all the faculty's bios, I dropped them into ChatGPT, and it gave us a mission statement. So could it? Yeah. Would I rely on it? No. Could it be a foundation, perhaps, to start a conversation? Maybe, but I think a lot of the potential of AI is being overblown. But that's just, I'm also a guy that refuses to get an e-reader. I still read old books, and I like to read physical newspapers. So call me a Luddite. What can I say?
And it looked like you were about ready to jump in.
No, I mean, my mind's been on overdrive, just thinking about all the really important steps and how that fits within the context of the federal government. And I do reflect back on when we launched category management 9 years ago with many of the GSA folks on this call. And it was a huge paradigm shift in how we organize ourselves and deliver our procurements. And it has survived 3 administrations. And, it's not perfect by any means, but I realized we did leverage a lot of these steps, Andy, without realizing that's what we were actually engaging in somewhat of a change management strategy. But there is there's a guiding coalition. I think it was the right people. We modified it slightly to change the governance group, but it was a combination of believers and maybe disbelievers, but they were all acquisition leaders and they represented important agencies. We had a White House memo that laid out the vision, the communication strategy for reinforcing that vision. We tried to have early wins to really make the case of why it was important. But there were also things where we fell short, and I think, I've just been thinking about how we put this within the context of sustainability, federal government, what we've learned from past change management efforts in the federal government, GSA in particular. Food for thought.
I liked what you said, that you came up with your own process that worked in your own context.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to hang on that. Don't jam everything into this model.
Yeah. Right.
And you can add steps. You know what? You can. John Cotter may not like it, but John Cotter's not there. So
Right.
you can add steps, you can amend his steps, you can jumble things around. This is just a framework to help you. It is not, the 10 Commandments etched in stone. Don't allow it to be that. And in many ways, you're going to adapt and amend as you go.
Yeah.
Run into roadblocks you didn't anticipate, you're going to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the answers may not lie in this 8-step process.
That's right. Yeah. That's good advice. Thank you. Yeah. GSA's had a lot of experience in driving large scale government-wide initiatives. So I want to make sure we're also leveraging all the experience.
In academia, we think that we've got all the answers, and it drives me crazy. And I've been doing some work lately on helping students discern their calling in management. I'm very excited about this. And I was just reading a paper in our top journal, ASQ, on callings. And the abstract says, yeah, in the 20 years of research on callings, these are the questions that we haven't answered. And I'm thinking, for goodness sake, Jesuits been working on callings for over 1,000 years. And you think the last 20 years of academic scholarship covers the domain? Give me a break. And so you guys know your organization. John Cotter doesn't. Andy Hoffman doesn't. Make it work for your organization.
Yeah. Thank you.
Andy, I want to be respectful of your time. And I also want to thank you. This, I think, was a really terrific session to get us thinking at a higher level about how these pieces are going to fit together. And I'm really excited about what we're going to do next in the Jamboard as we reflect on what we've heard here and how we're thinking about the ways in which it might inform our next steps. So with that, you're welcome to stay. And
I gotta run.
I anticipate you have other things going on. So thanks again, Andy.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everybody. I hope it was helpful. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, wow. I am going to pop into the chat our Jamboard. One moment. And I'm sorry, I'm in a different space today, so I've got a tiny little laptop screen in front of me, but I found it. Yeah,
I can share my screen if you want, Nicole, while this is going on.
yep,
Sure.
thank you. All right, so here's our Jamboard. Go ahead and get in there. And really, this is an opportunity for us to think about the takeaways from what Andy said, to reflect on how the recommendations have been built out, whether we think, because we have a window of opportunity to shift, to bend some of our language in there based on what we've heard, but it's also an opportunity to ask ourselves, how is this going to inform some of the work that we're going to be undertaking moving ahead? So why don't we go ahead and first focus on major takeaways that resonated with you in this last hour? Just checking in. Do you need a few more minutes? So I feel like today we have the luxury of a discussion. Oftentimes we have so many things that we need to pack into our meeting that we organize behind the scenes and talk about, the themes, the broader themes at a later date. We actually have time to have a discussion amongst us. And I guess the first thing I want to ask is, how does what we've heard today change in the recommendations that we've developed? Do we need to pivot, or in your mind, does this just help cement some of the items that are already there? Think at a higher level.
Well, I definitely don't see a need to pivot.
Okay.
I see he confirmed a number of things that we discussed. I think it'll provide some discussions with the larger group, the larger committee around, like I said, the profile of the organization, the sense of urgency. I mean, these are some things that we can answer, but these are some things that will need to be framed by the larger committee to really make this successful. The one thing that I got out of this, and this really came from David, was this whole stakeholder, the mapping piece, something that I think is needed, not something that we can do, but something that GSA will need to do internally to really make this work. Perhaps this is something that we can recommend somewhere that they focus on this, because that is critical.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Daryl. I picked up on that as well. I agree with you on that.
And I wonder if there are experiences in other agencies that we might be able to draw on to look at how they rolled this forward. Could be that we have expertise within our own committee to think about how that was rolled forward. But I agree, Daryl, that was an item that definitely stuck out for me too. Mark, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me okay?
Ken.
Yeah, I think this was a really good session in cementing things. What I think we've done in our recommendations is really try to embed the mindset through training and certification. And I think through that, you're winning the hearts and souls, which gets me to a place where I'm comfortable, where all this is really a feeling, the urgency, doing things that are right, making independent decisions. I think that's right on track. So perfect.
One of the other things that stuck out for me was that this call to action, that somehow the climate change on its own is going to create the call to action within the agency that we hope. And Andy was pretty adamant about that's not going to change anything. What it did for me, it caused me to reflect on you all remember when Al Gore had his Inconvenient Truth movie that came forward, and the belief was that once everyone understood the urgency of the problem, that it was just going to create this massive change across society. And what it did was it paralyzed a lot of individuals. It caused individuals to root themselves in even deeper into status quo. And for others, they felt like and this is what Andy cautioned us about, that the concept's so abstract, they can't figure out how it connects to the work that they're undertaking. So as that vision gets articulated at the highest levels, connecting it to the work and the strategic mission of the organization is really, I think, going to be quite important.
Hey, Nicole, if I can add a couple of thoughts here. I feel like one thing that I took away from this, And I agree with Daryl. I think the recommendation that you have, it fits well with what we heard today. But I think is there a compelling tagline or story or something that maybe in a phase 2 could be part of some brainstorm within the committee? I mean, there's this phrase or something that would just resonate, not just at GSA, but beyond GSA. So I think that there's an interesting action there with that. I think David has alluded to that before, but I think there's some creative process here. And I mean, Amazon is really good at this, and so is some of the leading companies. But is there some little tagline or something that will tie in? So that's number one. Number two, I feel like there is a baselining that could happen at GSA and perhaps maybe in a follow-up action. Like, what are the other initiatives that we're competing with to really understand how this fits into the bigger picture of a day in the life of an acquisition professional? And so that might be a follow-up action, not on this set of recommendations, but perhaps on a future. What else are we competing with?
That's interesting.
So those are, my thoughts top of mind here that just thought I'd put them out there for you to consider.
That is, I don't know. That would be a long list of what else.
I know, that's my head's like, oh my God.
And it depends on the week, I suppose, but I like your point, Boris, of there's definitely more work to be done. I'm wondering if we just need to acknowledge somewhere in that section that, we recognize that the federal government may be somewhat unique and just, large, complex, decentralized. Like, it seems like all the research has really been focused on private companies. Maybe it doesn't need said, but just some acknowledgement that it is its own sort of unique ecosystem, both the fact that it's government and it's large scale and complex. Yeah, I don't know if you need to modify anything, Nicole, but maybe it could be something we voice over, during the actual presentation.
I mean, I'm thinking back, like I worked for the Army before GSA for a number of years. So we had Army of One, that was a clever, and that's brilliant. I mean, that just really, it was a game changer for recruiting, and that's what I'm thinking about. Is there a real clever phrase that, and this is a down the road brainstorming type action?
Well, the Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror.
Yeah.
Sustainability in the mirror.
There you go.
Again, I'm wondering, is that a point that the committee, not the subcommittee, but the committee takes on and emphasizes? I mean, I don't think we have to emphasize it, because it's going to be all of the committees, the work of all of our groups that recognizes that.
And the one thing I would add, Daryl, and along with Boris's comment, is knowing what else is on the table. That may be hard to do, Ann, but knowing what else is on the table also gives us the opportunity to figure out where there are points of linkage.
That's true.
So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're saying, hey, you're doing that. Let's incorporate this in with that.
Yeah, and we can partner with GSA to do that. Actually, there are some people in GSA that are thinking that way too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it ties to what GSA did really well when it launched the IT certification program, in that they did start with the end user and really try to understand what they do every day. And it was both like, where are you falling short? What are the gaps? But what else do you have on your plate? And it is really understanding a day in the life of. So I think that kind of gets to what everyone is saying.
For me, it also, sorry, I see your hand up, Mark. I want to acknowledge it. For me, it also punctuated the importance of our second priority, because our priority 2 is about empowering the workforce. And Andy talked about that. People need to be empowered in the work that they do, but we're also talking about thinking about the mechanisms by which we can advance sustainability so it's drop dead easy. So these competing priorities don't feel like they're competing priorities, because we've made it easier for them in thinking through the process diagram, the levers that could be pulled, the integrations that could take place. So the information's already there. You know, it's already been prioritized.
Yeah.
Mark.
Nicole, I really like what you just said. And an example of that is in our facilities management area, where somebody is touching a state-owned building, automatically you say, well, how are the windows? Do they need a film? How are the transformers? Do they need upgraded? How is the HVAC system? Does it need automatic switching for turning off during holiday periods? How is the lighting? Does it turn off the bathrooms when you're leaving? All this checklist of sustainable related purchasing changes should be automatic and habitual. I really like that approach.
Mhm.
What else should we take away from this as we move forward? I do acknowledge that, Daryl, you've said a couple of times, some of these issues aren't just our committee, our subcommittee, it's a broader committee issue.
Yeah.
And because we can talk about the workforce, but it connects to advancing new policies. It connects to the industry partnerships and the eagerness of individuals to create those partnerships and the success associated with those partnerships. So I am definitely asking myself how the information could connect with the other subcommittees too. Morris, were you going to jump in?
I was glad to see Luke in the meeting. He had to drop off because he's thinking very, very focused on that whole technology side of the house. So he's been pulling some cool things together on the technology. So I was really glad to see him here.
And Boris, are they advancing that as part of this set of recommendations or the next one?
The next one, but they are, they're making making good progress on that.
Nice.
Yeah, some cool things happening on that front.
I think there was a real, really important point you made around this shouldn't be framed as an either or a win-lose.
The zero-sum.
Yeah, zero-sum game. What phrase can we use? And it may be something, Nicole, we want to just tease out a little bit when it's presented. Because I think we are dead in the water if it's seen as yet one more mandate, yet one more thing to do, even if we explain the why. And we really have to articulate how it ties to everything that you do. Nearly every single acquisition, at least a large portion of them, are going to have some sustainability component to it. Anyway, more to think through there, but it shouldn't be framed as just one more box to check. See, I got a fourth overused analogy in there.
All right. So I think these orange stickies are high-level takeaways related to how this moves forward into the next conversations, not just the presentation at the beginning of May. Some of them are relevant there, others are not, but how it connects with priority 2 as we start developing it. But also, I'm anticipating that we get questions that come up through the GSA review of our 3 recommendations that are going to ask us, we'd like for you to drill down a little bit more here and give us advice in some other pointed areas where this might connect with. All right, well, let's pivot and talk about next steps. Boris, can you give us a sense about where we are in this process and what the next steps?
I will, but I'm really chatty today. I don't know why, but Anne, I wanted to piggyback on what you said, and I really think this could be a talent magnet if we do it right, because we have a new
Right.
generation of professionals that are really interested in climate much more so than previous
Yes.
generations. So, and this is where Jeff sometimes goes when we have these conversations. It's like, how do we get people in the government? And if you do this right, this could be branded in
Yes.
such a way that you're bringing people that want to work for the government because it's the right thing to do. You can have impact literally in the whole economy when you're bringing this new generation that's interested in climate and sustainability.
Right.
But anyway, it just a thought that I want to put out there. I've said it before, but I want to say it again.
I'll tell you though, there's nothing more powerful than seeing homes fall into the ocean, you know, as to creating a sense of urgency. Like it really is. I feel like everyone now has experienced it in a personal way. And so that sense of urgency will be building across any generation,
Yeah.
Gen Z, Gen X, or boomers.
But I can talk about next steps. I think Mark had a comment. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Boris. I think between you and Nicole, I've got some things about packaging this, especially for a future generation, is really important, and having a tagline that's catchy, something about instead of having to do something, you have an opportunity to make a change and vote for the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
There you
Sustainable.
go.
That kind of message.
Yeah.
And I really like the simplicity, and I like the draw. It has a lot of appeal, but this is kind of a brainstorming event. So I like the idea of the committee coming together on it, because ideas from everywhere contribute to its gravity.
Yep, I agree. But on to what Nicole had asked me to do. So let's talk about process-wise. So we are in the process of reviewing all subcommittee recommendations right now. So our goal is by close of business tomorrow, be able to push the 3 recommendation reports from the 3 subcommittees to Jeff. So Jeff, Nick, Bill. So he's got like 3 or 4 people in his leadership team that want to kind of help. And so they're going to start reviewing by the end of tomorrow. So I'd say Thursday, Friday, they're going to have a chance to review. And Jeff will definitely give us comments. He's very interested in looking at the draft recommendation. So if you want to take a look at your document between now and the end of the day tomorrow, so I'm talking about 5 p.m. Eastern time. And if you want to consolidate comments, anything else that you want to just look, there's a couple of comments, and I've been looking at all 3 of them. So that's the process. So we will give Jeff an opportunity to review, comment, and then we want to be able to, our goal is to be done with the report by the 28th, April 28th. That's when we want to have the final ready to go. But as far as process-wise, that's what we're looking at. So the next key date is close of business tomorrow for any more edits that you want to make. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, Jeff will very much give you comments and feedback.
Boris, will Jeff share it with OMB?
I don't think so. And you are welcome to do that. I mean, if you got some stakeholders. I
was just thinking because it's workforce like Joni and Porter and sustainability.
Yeah, he probably won't, but I don't know. The other thing that Jeff might do, and I'm not sure he'll do this, he might share with Crystal as well. And I could see him doing that just for courtesy to have Crystal kind of see what's going to be coming down the pipe.
Do you want to check with him to see if he wants us, or what the process is, whether he's sharing it or we should share it? Or
I'm thinking because I'm thinking like subject matter expert. We talked to Joni and we talked to Katie in the process. So I think it's fine to confirm, what you're thinking about with them.
Okay. I think I can't share the doc physically outside of who's already been approved. So I don't know if you have to do that.
But you can. Melissa?
You can cut and paste, Dan.
Yeah, you can download it as a Word document.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted them to be able to edit and comment like in the document, so we don't have version control.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't think there's any way around that.
Yeah, I would do it as a downloaded Word doc, and then they can you know, yeah, I would
What do
I
you
would do
mean?
a
You
separate.
can't share it with someone in the federal government?
Well, the thing is, because of the FACA rules, I'm trying to kind of maintain just the integrity on the FACA rules. So that
Okay,
would be, yeah.
understand.
But
Yeah,
the thing I'm saying
understand.
is that they are subject matter experts that we talked to earlier, so it's okay to confirm
Great.
your findings. So, and that's why I said you can download it.
Okay,
You know, it's a
will
Word.
do. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
And,
but I will check with Jeff and see what he's planning to do.
and Boris, right now, this was something that Troy called out. She said, you've got a lot of footnotes here. I'd like to make the footnote-rich document less footnote-rich. And for now, the attributions are there to show where the advice came from what source. At the point it becomes a public document, our intention was to get rid of
Okay,
attribution. And
Yeah,
so if that
that's-
pops up in the GSA process, I just wanted to let you know that's what we were
yeah,
thinking.
no, that's good. And we can put a note to that effect so that they know. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. Yeah. One of the other subcommittees had an appendix, the single-use plastics. They added an appendix to theirs because there was some very specific things that they were doing. I'm not sure if you were going to do an appendix on yours. I think you had the change model, but I'm not sure that you had any plans for that.
That's all we had was the change
Okay.
to illustrate it was rooted in something bigger than.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, and I think it's good. I think it's good. Yeah.
I mean, we could add Andy's note at the end that articulates all of the stages in a generic way, if you think that's useful. I just don't have a sense of how useful that would be.
No, and you can also put a link to that paper, you know, if there is if it's
great
public,
idea.
that you just
Yep.
put a link to that paper. So I skimmed it over. It looks pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's it on process. And then we are gonna do a dry run for the May 4th meeting next week on the regular time for this admin meeting. So we were just gonna invite the committee to sit in on an abbreviated dry run. Just we're gonna go through everything on an abbreviated time frame next week on the same time.
Quick clarification. So is the full committee part of the dry run?
Yeah, we invited everybody to sit in on that, just, you know,
Yep.
kind of get as many of them to see kind of what we're planning to do.
And for the chairs and co-chairs in preparation for that, the idea is that we're just going to talk at a high level about the the mission, the priorities, and our recommendations.
Right, so I send out a template for the briefing decks
Yep.
to be prepared, and so we'll take a look at wherever you are on that. They don't need to be completed, but just, you know, you don't need to go through the whole presentation, but just the highlights, just a
Okay.
quick, yeah.
I'm glad we're talking about this.
Yeah, and I'll send out a reminder to all the chairs just to make sure we're clear on that.
In my mind, I'm thinking this, I need to focus on the slide decks for May 4th, but I'm hearing you
Yeah.
say, oh, you want this initial thing to start moving forward. Okay, I'm
There
glad.
you go.
All right, Mark, your hand's up.
Thank you. And Boris, maybe you can give us a little more of the lay of the land. How do you view the meeting coming together, and what, if anything, are the bystanders' role in supporting or commenting?
So are you talking about the May 4th meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going to be, and that we'll do the right run, so we're just kind of go through it. What we're looking at, Mark, actually, we posted the agenda today on the website, so the agenda is there for the May 4th meeting. What we're looking for is going to be some brief intro remarks from our leadership, Crystal, Jeff, myself, and then we are going to launch into the 3 subcommittees to give a report. So it'll be, each subcommittee will have a half hour. 20 minutes to present and about 10 minutes for question and answer. And we're trying to resolve all the Q&A beforehand, so that period will be short, not as much Q&A. And so each subcommittee will present their recommendations. And then at the end, Troy and Cassius are going to facilitate the meeting. They will then close the meeting with a summary. Here's all the recommendations we receive, and then we'll take a vote, a full committee vote on the recommendations. And then after that, we're going to invite the administrator of GSA. So Robin Carnahan plans to be there at the end to give some closing remarks. She'll thank the committee for the work, and then she will we'll have Crystal, Jeff, myself, and then that's the meeting. So that's the plan, Mark, and a very abbreviated, but you can look at the website, the GAPFAC website, and you'll see the agenda there.
And
And
so,
then looking down the road, is there an acceptance period, an implementation period? A
So
feedback period?
that's a good question, Mark. So down the road, so what we're gonna do is after the meeting, we're gonna then we'll have the package ready. And if there's any changes we need to make, we can do that after the meeting. But that's gonna go through our chain of command. So it's gonna go to the administrator. But before it gets to her, it has to go through Jeff and Crystal, and then the administrator. And then from then on, the follow-up, and I'll talk a little bit more at the dry run, but the plan there is there's two things. One, there could be some follow-up actions from the recommendations, like maybe there's a little bit more we want to do in some of them. And the second thing is then we move on to the next set of recommendations, which is we've delivered this first set. Now the subcommittees are going to work on the next set of recommendations. That makes sense?
Works for me, thanks.
Okay.
so to the subcommittee next week, it's not an administrative meeting that's going to be hosted during our regular time. It is the dry run
For
session
the full committee.
for the whole committee.
Right, correct. And whoever can be there, so it's an optional, but we'll see however many can make it. We'll
That's
go through that. Mhm. I think that was it. I'll turn it back to you, Nicole.
Yeah, I think this might be the first time that we actually finish a meeting early. But let's be clear, it's because of all the hard work that you all have been doing to get us in the place that we can finish our meeting early today. It's been a marathon for sure. Although for several weeks it's felt like a sprint, but
It has. Yeah, so now great speaker today. I really took a lot of notes here. This is
good. I'm
a
glad.
topic I'm passionate about, change management. I spent a lot of my career doing that.
That's terrific. I've known Andy since I was a PhD student, and that wasn't 25 years ago or anything. It was yesterday.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. I think that's it. I think we're good. I am looking forward to seeing you all next week. And I suspect we do need to meet on Friday to talk about how we want to position our slides. And if that time doesn't work for you, we'll figure out another one. You're on mute.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think I'll reach out to you about timing. Sounds good.
All right, everyone. Have a
All
great
right, so
Thank
we'll go
you.
ahead and adjourn this meeting so you can stop the recording.